Hey guys, just wanted to walk you through a few tips and tricks for using the InDesign template that I've given you to create a BFA portfolio or a gallery portfolio or maybe some sort of financial opportunity portfolio, for example, maybe a grant or a scholarship. But oftentimes with these opportunities, you have to submit some sort of a PDF that includes your work laid out really clearly and succinctly. And so just kind of wanted to review some of the information here on the first page, which, by the way, it can eventually be deleted. So I'm just kind of using this to kind of give you guys the information efficiently. But this is a portfolio assignment slash demo. And I'd like for you to create a portfolio for continued art studio or graphic design study at the BFA level. And then it says follow the below guidelines to get started. And then when you're done, please package and upload your completed portfolio for Canvas submission. So I'm going to walk you through a few of those things. Down here, there is some information as far as an example portfolio prompt. And I think it's really important that I mention to you guys that this came directly from a CSU departmental page. And so it literally is maybe the faculty committee members putting together some pieces of information to guide potential BFA students as far as what they're looking for. Okay. And then the following one is an example artist statement prompt, which can also be useful. The next thing I'm going to do is, let's see, I want to make sure that I am in the Essentials Classic work mode. So I'm going to come over here and uh, maybe I should take a step back and just talk a little bit about InDesign. InDesign is publication software. Originally, it was produced so that folks making large books or magazines could essentially composite lots of different types of assets into one file using an application that wouldn't crash. So, for example, using something like Photoshop or Illustrator is not advisable to do something with, say, like 50 or 100 or even like 300 pages, especially if it's heavy in graphics and other vector graphic applica or assets. So essentially, like if you were to use Photoshop and just start dumping a lot of things into multiple pages or Illustrator, the file size would balloon and more than likely your file would eventually become unstable, meaning that it would crash more often. InDesign works a little bit differently, where it actually sort of links or connects to files, like for example, Photoshop document files or a PSD file that of maybe one of your artworks that you've adjusted. Um, and it doesn't actually bring it on board into the file size. Rather, what it does is it sort of links to things so that so when it does come time to export, it can talk to those files that are on the periphery, but it doesn't actually bring those files on board. And I know that's sort of a little bit rhetorical, but you really kind of get a sense of that once you start using the application. Okay? So just, for a quick tour, it's very important when I am like working with these applications or introducing these things to folks that maybe haven't used them before. It's good for everyone to be on the same page as far as what the interface is looking like. So I always ask everyone to go to up on the right-hand side, the top right-hand corner, you can choose a workspace and please go down and choose Essentials Classic. And in addition to doing that, you can also reset Essentials Classic, which will basically bring the interface back to square one so that it is, in my opinion, really easy to navigate. As you become more familiar with this application, if you decide to take more classes with me, then this would become second nature, and sometimes you arrange your workspace however you prefer it to look. But for now, I think it's really great to be able to have convenient access to, for example, the pages that you're going to be making, um, and also the layers that you're going to be having to lock or turn on and off. There's another really valuable area here on the top right, and that's for links. And you can see it's blank right now because we haven't hooked up this InDesign document with anything. So for example, we haven't placed any images or any assets yet. And by the way, InDesign is very, very flexible. So it can take a Photoshop document, it can take an Adobe Illustrator document, and you don't have to export things. You can just place the Adobe files directly into this Adobe file. And what's even more fascinating about and convenient about InDesign is that, let's say, for example, you've hooked up an Illustrator document of some sort of illustration or graphic. And then you go into Illustrator, you open up that document and you make a change. Well, InDesign is smart enough to know that a change has made as far as an Illustrator document that it's going to be talking to. And so what it will do is it will give you a notification or you'll see a notification that will ask you, do you want to update the Illustrator file? So that it reflects the changes that you've made in the newly saved version. So this is really smart, beautiful, powerful software. And the analogy, like if you're new to this sort of thing, just imagine Dr. Frankenstein. And Dr. Frankenstein is putting together, the monster. And he is finding, I know this is a little bit of a dark gothy reference, but I like this one. He's finding body parts, like, torsos, heads, feet, whatever he needs to put this guy together, and he's finding it in different places. And he's using his laboratory to put all these things together. So imagine like he's compositing all of these things into Frankenstein. And that's basically how InDesign works. It's Dr. Frankenstein, and you're compositing all of these things together to create a publication or a poster or something that requires assets from multiple applications. You can also just place a JPEG or a PNG file. So often, in fact, the Fritz Shoulder example assets that we're going to be using, those are just simply JPEGs. They're not treated in Photoshop or anything fancy like that. I just pulled them off the internet and they're JPEGs, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the black arrow tool, which you're going to be using a lot. The tools are generally all on the left-hand side, and I'm not going to go through all of these tools today because this is a fast tutorial. But one thing you are going to need to use is the black arrow tool, and it's simply the selection tool. So you can use this to move things around, okay? So for example, that's a text box, and using the black arrow tool, I can move it around, but I want to put it back in this corner. The other tool that you're going to be using a lot for this demo is the text box tool, possibly. And so if you want to create some text, you literally just activate the text tool, click, and then drag and drop. And then notice how the cursor is blinking here right now. And then all you'd have to do is start typing. If you want to change the font or the typeface, you have to come in here and select the text and then change the font to whatever you prefer. And so you can see the fonts that I use often. Here's Helvetica and Garamond, and I like Gil Sans and Bodoni. So, you guys will maybe have your preference. I actually think that for a portfolio project, using a font that's really legible and clean and basically more modern, I think is advisable. And so I would suggest that you use Helvetica, and you can see you can make Helvetica bold, you can have it regular, you can tell it that you want it to be italicized. And so it has a lot of flexibility, Helvetica, and it's really professional. And what I really like about it is that it's unbiased. So it's really kind of like a more sort of non-expressive typeface and also a workhorse that really just kind of solves problems quickly and efficiently. So I would advise, especially if you're new to design or new to this software, that you sort of default to Helvetica for the time being, okay? And by the way, all of this typeface here, it's Helvetica, right? You're actually not going to have to create a lot of new text. with this particular demo because I've actually done a lot of the work for you, okay? And you'll see that as we proceed. I want to go back to layers really quickly. And again, you can find the layers palette over here on the right-hand side, assuming that you're in the Essentials Classic mode and that you've reset the workspace. And just as a reminder, you do that right here, okay? Um, but let's say we want to look at layers. So go ahead and click that little icon on the right-hand side, and layers will pop up. And I want to walk through this really briefly. When I'm creating some sort of a publication document, I always have a layer for typography, which is basically a fancy word for words, okay? I always have a separate layer for content, and that's where you're going to be putting all of your images. And then I have this third layer that I created with this layout diagram, which I think is really important for this sort of a project. It's essentially a responsive diagram that's broken down from the dimensions of the page, which is, by the way, 11 by 17, okay? It's not 8.5 by 11. This artboard or page is 11 by 17. You could still print it out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, but I'm just sort of assuming that whoever is looking at this portfolio, maybe they want to see things a little bit larger. And so I went with 11 by 17, which is a standard paper size that you could have printed, locally, or maybe if you have to go to Kinko's or something like that. So 11 by 17 is a pretty handy, simple paper, common paper size. So I have a real nice margin because I don't want to take my imagery or text all the way to the edge. I want to have a nice clean half-inch margin. And then from there, I just kind of broke things down. And what I like about this grid-like formation is that you can put an image that fills the entire page. You can put an image on the left-hand side that maybe, for example, it shows your painting, like eh, the full size of your painting. And maybe on the right-hand side, you have a detail of your painting that you'd like to show, or maybe even two. So essentially, you can kind of break this down according to whatever assets you have that are related to your project to tell the story of what your work is about. I think, with these BFA application portfolios, they want you to keep things simple. And so some of this information maybe you'll use down the road, possibly. But if I'm not mistaken, if I go to my, hold on, give me one moment. I'm going to open up a Finder window because I want to show you some examples of a portfolio that, let's see, that I've used previously when I was looking for work. And it basically mapped out both my work, my studio work, and the work by my students. Okay. So I'm going to go into my archive, courses. This is the portfolio class. So I'm going to cruise into here. Let's see, here's the portfolio demo that I've created. And then here are some examples that I can show you. And it looks like this one is from 2024. Let's see what's going on here. It says student work. Okay, so this is just, I was, in order to find a teaching job, I was trying to just, show folks what I had done with students previously. Some of these projects might even look familiar to some of you, but this is the insect project, and I love this one because it looks really kind of like it's digital, but it's painterly, really exhaustive with, beautiful details here, and then it kind of relaxes back there. So this is, for example, using that grid, but it's just one big image, okay? Here's another example where things are split into two. So for this particular student, I had him do a music poster, and this is for the Beastie Boys, and this was variant A and variant B. So he did two slightly different versions of this Beastie Boys poster, okay? This one definitely gets a little bit more complicated, and it really showcases that underlay or grid or layout diagram that I've created for you, because you can have a big image on the left-hand side, and maybe there are a bunch of like process things that you'd like to show to the committee on the right-hand side. So you can start using that diagram to break things apart and create a layout system that is really rational and beautiful and organized and not uncomplicated, which is very, very nice. So I could go through a lot of these and just kind of show you how I'm using that layout system to show folks what I'm up to. And you can also see that on the bottom, I have my name and I have the page number. Just anything I can do to sort of keep things clean and simple, but also give folks the right amount of information. And the real truth is this kind of process, it's curated. You don't, you have to decide what your best image is or what your best images are, okay? And then how you're going to arrange them on the page. Keep in mind that folks have generally a short attention span, so you really need to tell your story pretty quickly, all right? This is one, here's the final image on the left, and then some process business. I wanted folks to see that this is local to a place, on the Navajo Nation, and maybe some influences that fed into the project that the student did, and also maybe some sketches. Here's a screenshot of some digital business. This is all stuff that the student actually gave me when he delivered the project, because when I was talking about the prompt, I was really emphasizing how important process is and documenting your process. And the real truth is, I'm trying to do that same thing with you all. Be obsessed with yourself and document your process. You don't know whether you're going to need it or use it down the road, but do yourself a favor, do your career a favor, do your creative professional sort of dream a favor and save all of this stuff. Okay. And of course, this really puts it into context because this is a t-shirt project. And actually, Dustin sent me one of these t-shirts. Maybe sometimes you guys have seen me wearing this shirt, but I'm always really proud to wear it, except mine is on black. So. But look at all this beautiful work. I'm always really proud just kind of like looking at this stuff. And it's also, of course, really valuable because it shows how, again, flexible that layout system can be um, when you're thinking about how to present your own work. Okay. So let's close that up. And you've seen an example, and you can definitely see how this layout system is very, very helpful when you're deciding where to put things. And now you might be wondering, okay, well, I want to start putting some stuff. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few basic things to help you to get started. With the demo file that I've given you, it included the layout grid or diagram on a specific layer that you can turn on and off. And it also includes a page with one rectangle frame tool. And I know you guys are thinking it's really hard to see. I mean, I'm not sure if I can see it. Well, I can toggle content on and off, and you can see that X or that rectangle frame is toggling on and off. And if I were to unlock that layer, I can now select it. And after I select it, these handles appear. And you can actually move these handles around. Okay? Pretty cool, huh? You would move those handles around dependent on, of course, the layout diagram behind. There's something else that's happening that I want to talk to you guys about. I like the grid a lot, which, by the way, you can turn on and off with command parentheses. Okay, command parentheses. And I have snapped a grid on currently. So if you can toggle that on and off by going to View, Grids and Guides, and then snap to document grid, and you can see that I currently have it checked on, but you can easily turn it off. I am big on the grid when I'm doing design because it just facilitates and moves things along more quickly. So the real truth is you're constantly turning this snap to document grid on and off. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back on because I want, when I'm moving these handles or the edges of the rectangle frame, I want them to be snapping to the grid. Okay, like this whole layout system is in dialogue with the grid. Okay. So if I want to drop an image, I'm going to put it back where I had it, where it spans the whole entire. And by the way, you can kind of see like all four of these edges are talking to the far edge of the diagram. They're not going into the margin, they're just talking to the edge of the diagram. Okay. If I want to place a Fritz shoulder painting within this rectangle, all I have to do is highlight the rectangle frame and then go up to File, Place. A dialog box will pop up, and I'm going to navigate. Give me a second. I have to go through my course file system wormhole here. So cruise over to Portfolio Gallery, Portfolio Demo. Here's the demo folder, and I've given you this folder called Canon-TC. TC Cannon is, a real fantastic Native American artist that, is not necessarily from New Mexico, but became connected with New Mexico quite a bit, which is where I'm from. Um, but anyway, there are two folders here, drawings and paintings. And if you click on paintings, there are a lot of different options. Like, I think I have two motives here. My first motive, of course, is to show you the software, but I think it's great to introduce you to TC Canon if you've never seen his real beautiful, vibrant paintings and drawings. Just gorgeous portraiture of everyday life, friends, family, community members. Very, very powerful work. So all of these were just simply pulled off of the internet, but they're useful for this demo. And I'm giving you guys the TC Canon work to show you, just his brilliance. But I'm also saying, hey, like maybe you're still building your own portfolio, and you need to document some work in the meantime, take some photographs and prepare some assets. But so that you can learn the software, I wanted you to have something to work with. So what better artist than TC Cannon? So simply go in and select a painting that you're drawn to, and then also notice here it says replace selected item. It's always a good idea to have that checked, okay? And then simply click open. And this is interesting because, I mean, the image that I pulled off of the web was huge, like very, very large, which is a good thing because we want good quality, right? We don't want low quality images. But you might be thinking, well, I can't see the painting. Well, I'm about to show you the beauty of InDesign and the software. So with the rectangle frame selected, I can now go up to Object, Fitting, and then say fit content proportionally. But what I'd really like to do is I want to show you these four options. What really like, I don't know, you're not going to need all of them, but fill frame proportionally basically means that we we can't see the full painting, but we want to get as much graphic or visual information within the frame as possible. If I zoom out, and I can do that with Command negative, you can see the pages sort of like stacked on top of each other, but you can also select the frame. And then if you double click into the frame, this line, you can see this line that's kind of like spanning into these other pages. Well, believe it or not, that's the boundary of the actual image that the frame is holding. And that's a good analogy to think about as far as these frames. They're essentially windows that are holding stuff, whether it's a JPEG, a PNG, a PSD, or an Illustrator file. A rectangle frame tool is able to hold stuff. Okay. I currently have the painting that's inside the frame selected, so I can even hit Shift and the cursors up and down. And I can sort of even position this the way that I want it. But why in the world would I only want to see part of TC Cannon's painting? So I'm going to select this object, go back up to Object, Fitting, and this time I'm going to say Fit Content Proportionally. So I just did fill frame proportionally. Now I'm going to do fit content proportionally. There you go. So now the whole entire painting is now visible, even with what I want to point this out. If I select the rectangle frame, the boundary of the actual window frame is all the way over here. You don't need this guy over there because it's just not necessary. There's a lot of great flexibility in InDesign, and if this is your first time using InDesign, I would suggest that maybe you just create 15 pages with just one rectangle frame tool and start dropping your JPEGs or PSDs of your own work in eventually, okay? So you might be thinking, well, like the layout diagram is there. Like that's not cool. I don't like that. Well, at some point you can just turn that off and turn off the grid, okay? And then you're just going to have this real beautiful centered placement of your image on the artboard, okay? I'm going to do that again down here, but I've also sort of predefined or preloaded or primed a couple rectangle frames that are split down the middle. So camera A, camera B, or 1, 2, all right? And you can even see also if I turn the grid on, look at the way I wanted there to be a little bit of padding in the middle. And so I left that. And again, I'm using the grid to create that because I want it to be consistent throughout my layout, okay? I want this to look professional because if I'm using this to get into a BFA program or an MFA program, or because I've applied for like a local community grant, I need to show my work as professionally as possible. And folks, you need to understand that details really do matter. Presentation matters. I would encourage you guys to focus on details and get this really right for whoever you might think would look at it. So um, I'm going to select the rectangle frame on the left-hand side. And I want to, again, show you guys where the place function is. So if I go to File and then Place, this dialog box will pop up. And I also want to point your attention. Remember, I had to start at the beginning with my hard drive and then kind of like make my way through the wormhole to get to this location. Well, InDesign remembers that I was here and I'm probably going to have to place something else. And so the user experience of this software is really strong because it's trying to save you time. The next thing I want to do is instead of a portrait view, I want to grab a painting that is a landscape view. Okay, so that one looks like a good candidate to me. So I'm going to click, I have replace selected item. Even though I'm not replacing anything, go ahead and select it. Well, that's weird. Again, I'm not seeing the full painting. So if I double click in, there's that boundary of the actual painting. And if I want it to fit, all I have to do is go to Object, Fit Content Proportionally. Okay. Maybe I want a nice detail of this painting on the right-hand side. Okay. And so I'm going to do the same thing on the over here, and I'm going to hit Command D. And by the way, I just used the shortcut for place. It's Command D. I'm going to select the same painting, click Open, and instead of just wanting to see the full image, what I can do is I can double click in, show the boundary, and then I can grab one of these corner handles and I can pull it out by holding Shift, okay? Which will essentially enlarge the image. Now, this is assuming that you have a Photoshop document file and it has some extraordinary detail. Or maybe you've taken a separate image just for details of your painting. So, but I think this is a really fun strategy. Maybe there's something special within your painting. Maybe there's some great texture, or you're really proud of the way that you were layering pigment and colors. And it's just a shame that folks don't have a close-up view of that moment in your painting. Well, this is a way maybe you could show that, okay? So that's how you place content in InDesign. Super simple. If you want to make new rectangle frame tools, Here is the tool on the left-hand side, and all you have to do is click and drag. And of course, you're going to have to adjust your boundaries, but that's really easy, especially, notice how I switched over to the black arrow tool. So I made the rectangle frame and then I switched over to the black arrow tool so I can select things and fit them properly. And if I want to turn the grid on and off, I would just want to remind you it's command parentheses. Okay. The document or excuse me, the rectangle frame will snap to grid whether the grid is visible or not. If you don't want it to snap, you actually have to turn it off. Just showing you guys again right here. Okay. Great. So you guys know how to place content and you know how valuable this system is. The next thing I want to show you guys is how to edit text. And as a reminder, all the text or typography is on one layer, and that's on purpose. And so you can actually lock it. When it's locked, I can't move things, I can't edit, I can't do anything to that text. So you have to make sure to unlock the typography layer. And then maybe while you're working on typography, you want to lock down content. So notice how I can't move the Fritz shoulder paintings anymore because they are locked. So that's just a way or a strategy to control your document, okay? Very, very valuable. Handy. Um, if you want to edit text, you just simply double click, and that's really important. You have to double click into the text box, and then you can use your cursor, select text, and then maybe say, this is some changed text, and then hit Command S to save. On the right-hand side is an area for your table of contents, and currently there are only 15 slots. So if you decide to add 5, that's really up to you, but it's super easy. If I were going to add another slot, what I would do is I would just select that line. I would copy it by hitting Command C. Then I would hit my right cursor and then hit return on my keyboard and then hit Command V. And then there you go. I've made my 16th line for my table of contents. After you've done that, you can go in and make changes as far as the title, the medium, the dimensions, and the year. Okay. Professor Morla asked, I thought, a wonderful question as far as chronology, and I really appreciated that. And so you can plug work in chronological, but I would advise, like, I think I would take a different perspective, and I would start off with some really, I mean, all of the work that you're including in your portfolio, I think should be strong, but maybe you want to start out really, really, really strong, and maybe you want to end really, really, really strong with just work that you think is really a good representation of your unique and personal approach to art or design process. Remember, you're trying to show folks that you are unique and that you have something to offer the department, all right? Um, you need some contact information, so you need to change your first and last name. Maybe you have an Instagram handle. And I think I always bring this up sort of jokingly in class, but I think it's a good idea to have a separate art account for whatever it is that you're doing as a creative. And I would also advise that maybe it's something a little bit more easy to find. So, oftentimes I think handles just get really, really complicated. And I want to just remind you guys that marketing is already difficult enough for artists. So why not use your first and last name and then add just art or design at the end just to keep it simple? Sometimes those handles are taken, so you have to get creative, but the real truth is sometimes, for example, if I'm trying to tag someone on our departmental OC account, sometimes it's quite difficult because basically the handle does not align with whomever I'm trying to, give a shout out to. So it makes it very, very difficult, and I would advise keeping things simple. Your first, your last name, and then just art for your handle. And of course, websites also, just your first and last name. And sometimes you have to add art, because in this day and age, things are being taken. Um, I think that you guys are going to run into a wall because you're thinking, okay, typography is not locked here. And I'm looking at the text on the lower right-hand corner with the page number. Okay. So typography is not locked, but I can't double click and get into that text. And that's because it's living on a parent page. And I'm going to show you how to access that so that you can make some modifications. So if you go back to pages, and then click on the parent page here, you'll see here's the layout diagram that I've created. And now on this page, you can go ahead and access this information and update it. Please keep the A there. The A will update or change according to whatever page you're on. So for example, the A may look like just an A here, but when I go to page 1, the A turns into a 1. Page 3, the A turns into a number 3, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind as far as updating that information. I've also conveniently put down a placeholder so that you can update or include the title, the medium, the dimensions, and the year in the lower left-hand corner. I think that would be nice. And I also used sort of like a smaller typeface. It's 10 points. I selected Helvetica Light because I don't want this to overpower the content here. We want folks looking here, and then maybe there's some contact information here and some valuable logistical information there. All right. I think that's enough information for this demo. Oh, I forgot one other thing. You guys might want to create some additional pages, right? Because with the demo file that I gave you, there's only 4 pages, and of which the first one eventually you might want to delete. Okay. Um, so to make a new page, if you want to make a page after page 4, highlight page 4, and then down here, click the plus sign. And now you have a blank page. And also be advised or notice that the layout diagram is on that new page because it was made or placed on the parent page. And same for that information down here. Okay. It has been inherited from that parent page. So every time you make a new page in InDesign, those two things will appear. All right. You can also arrange pages in InDesign. So I can move this 5th page back and make it 4. And I can also move it forward and make it number 5 again. All right. The last thing that you'll need to do is you have to package or save whatever your work is and deliver it to me on Canvas. Okay. And that's a real simple thing. When you're done, hit Command S, then come up here to File, Package, click Package, click the package. You don't really have to worry about a lot of this stuff, believe it or not. Okay. Click Package, and then give the name of your packaged folder something unique, like final dash Bollinger in all caps or your last name. Okay. And then save it in that same location. InDesign is thinking, and what it's doing is it's gathering all of the assets that are linked to this project, and it puts it into a convenient folder so that I get everything. And so I want to show you how this worked out. So if I back up, there it is right there. Portfolio demo, final Bollinger. And if I click in here, it gave me the document font, which is Helvetica. There's the InDesign file. if I want to open it down the road, me as your instructor. And it also gave me a folder called links. And within that folder, check that out, are the two Fritz shoulder images that we placed. Okay. So it's as easy as that. But there's one final step. On Canvas, you can't just give me the folder. You have to give me a zipped or compressed version of that folder. To zip or compress a file folder on a Mac, you simply highlight it, right click, and then compress. So please do not give me this one, but actually give me the one that has the .zip on the end, or it's been zipped or compressed. It's a zip archive. If you give me that via Canvas, I'll be able to open up this portfolio and I'll be able to see everything in InDesign. And the other nice thing about when you do package a file is that it will export a PDF for you. In this circumstance, we didn't turn off the background layer, but that's okay. You don't need to worry about that because I can turn that off later, or you can turn that off. You just need to be aware of it. But look at that beautiful PDF. I know it's not quite resolved, but it definitely is good for this demo. All right. One last thing. I know there's a few things happening with this demo, but when you do package your InDesign project, make sure you have all the eyeballs on your layers palette visible. So lock everything and turn everything on. Then save it and then package it. Okay, thanks guys. Have a good day.